back to Let's Talk Tuesday. This is the podcast where we have real conversations about learning, leadership, and what it truly takes to help people and organizations grow. Each week, we bring together different perspectives, experiences, and voices to explore what learning development really means, why it matters, and how we can do it better. Today, we have a very special guest, Frank Agin from Columbus, Ohio, who has over 40 years of experience in consulting, professional relationships, and entrepreneurship. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. Let's talk. Tell us a little bit about your background and what your current focus is today.
Um, well, I live in Columbus, Ohio. I came here 40 some years ago to go to law school. I have a law degree and an MBA from Ohio State. I started my career in public accounting. I was a tax consultant, which was, by all accounts, a great job, great pay, great everything, if you like to do taxes. And I didn't. So after about 6.5 years, I decided to leave and go into private practice. And I tell people that a funny thing happened to me when I went into private practice, and the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients.
Hmm.
So this is 1995. There was no internet really. There was no email. I don't even think I had a cell phone, Amanda. Um, and so I was just trying to figure out what to do and how to get clients. And I asked a friend who took a different path out of law school. She had actually started her own firm. I said, "Well, how can I get what you have?" And one of the things she suggested was getting into a tips club or a leads group. And I really had no idea what she was talking about, but through a couple introductions, she connected me with an organization that brought people together on a weekly basis, learned about each other, and exchanged referrals. So I'll just fast forward this whole story. I was with that for a couple years, loved it, made total sense to me that I could lift my whole world up helping other people. I ended up buying it. And
Wow.
I rebranded it as Am Spirit Business Connections and stopped practicing law. I spend my days helping entrepreneurs, sales reps, professionals become more successful, get more referrals through a program that we've put together that um, just helps them build relationships and exchange referrals with other people. So I'm a student of networking, professional relationships.
That's amazing. I love it. And, we definitely have the same passion of people and purpose and helping people grow and learn together. I love that. So, in your world, because you meet all types and professional networker over here, what does learning and development mean to you?
When I finished law school, just kind of a story behind it. When I finished law school, I'm like, I'm done reading. I am done. I don't want to learn anything else. I'm fried. And when I left that first firm, I, s- somebody handed me a book and I read it and I'm like, okay, well, it's just I had a thirst for knowledge. I always want to keep learning now. Always, I don't want to be that old dude who's just doesn't want to learn, right? Show me AI. Yeah, I want to do that. I want to figure this out. I'm not trying to solve all the world's problems or anything like that, but I don't want to be that person who is not willing to learn. So, you know, I think that's just part of the human condition. I think it keeps us young. But learning and development is just, okay, what is it that I don't know? What's the skill that I could gather that's going to make my life better or make somebody else's life better? And I don't think there's any end to that. In fact, knowledge is growing so fast, you literally cannot keep up. You just can't keep up.
Literally, day by
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, day by day. And I think that's a great thing because, people will say, "Oh, we're in such a bad place in the world and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, no, no, it's so great because we have so many people working on so many problems. We're just solving so many things. Um, it's a great time to be alive. It really
Yeah, it is
is.
what you make of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was thinking about while you were telling me that, it's so true. And as I started my entrepreneurship journey, I realized I had that entrepreneurship mindset always.
Yeah.
But what I learned about truly stepping into that and reading about it, I was like, oh, I had a similar thing. In school, I was always good at school, but I was never the one that was like, I didn't need to study. I didn't need to do that stuff. I could just go
Yeah.
ace a test. I was good at test taking, right? And so when I left school, even undergrad, even master's, like I was like, oh, and I think that what I learned the most about the entrepreneur spirit and like entrepreneurship as I entered that business ownership journey was really like the staggering statistics about how schools beat creativity out of kids because it's
Yeah.
about getting the A. It's not really about learning. It's about getting the A. It's about getting into the good school. It's about blah, blah, blah. But that's not really what learning is. And that's why I love what you said is like I was fried from learning in like the textbook standpoint, right? But in
Yeah.
the actual living life and that hunger and thirst for knowledge, oh, it is fun to read this engaging book. Oh, it is interesting to listen to a podcast and try to apply its principles.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing because I specialize in large scale learning and development where I'm constantly helping large organizations like help their people develop and get to the next place. And it's so, I think in today's world of technology and AI and all this stuff, so overload of information, right?
Yeah.
It's really about how do we create those learner experiences so that it's not a school classroom where you blurt out a ton of information at someone and they regurgitate it back because that's not really learning if they're not retaining it, if there's not a change in behavior, if there's not something that goes with it. And so it's fascinating how many people had a similar experience to yours of like, okay, I went through school and I was like, oh, I'm so sick of this. I don't want to read a book ever again. But then you're like, oh wait, I actually like learning new things
Yeah.
when it's done in a way where it's met with based off curiosity and the intention to grow and develop new skill set.
No, totally. Well, I think part of what happens is, um, like when I was in law school, you have these case studies, and it's like none of this applies to my life. But when you start getting out in the real world, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm reading this now, and I can apply this to my business.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have a vested interest in it. And
Yeah.
when you're in school, they they
You're
don't make it
right.
relevant. They don't.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
dad had a PhD in education. He taught
Mm.
teachers how to teach, right? I mean, that was
Yeah.
his whole thing.
Yeah.
And he would always tell us, I had an older brother, a younger sister, don't worry about grades, just learn the material.
Yep.
And it was like, it's hard not to worry about the grades because you're trying to get on the honor roll. It's
Mhm.
hard to, but I get what he's saying now. It
Yeah.
didn't matter how I did in chemistry. It was what mattered was I understood chemistry,
How are
just
you
as an
learning about learning?
yeah,
Yeah.
and what you can do with it. And I think that's where we really need to get to in education. And certainly in my organization, I'm always trying to, educate people. And it's not just to here, this is the practical application that's going to put dollars in your pocket, plain and simple. You
Yeah.
know, in your
Yeah.
world, it's like this will get you a promotion or help you hang on to a job.
Yeah. When I was an adjunct professor, I love it. I want to go back to it, but I moved and I have 2 degrees in psychology. I love what makes people tick, right? So my
Yeah,
undergrad is in psychology and business, my master's in industrial organizational psychology, and so I joke, but it's true. I'm certified to train birth through death.
right.
And the problem with the education system in a lot of cases, and even for me, I have 2 degrees in psychology. I love it. But the most boring class I ever took was Psych 101
Yeah,
because it's just memorizing terms. And so when I took it and taught it, I was like, no, like exactly what you said. How is it relevant to these kids and
yeah,
people's lives, right? And so I developed like every class was like an experiential type learning instead of just regurgitating terms. It's how do you make it applicable to their actual real life application? And so I talk about this a lot is blending like sure and it's funny because I did my master's different. I got my bachelor's in my 20s and my master's in my 30s and I joke maybe in my 40s I'll do PhD. But I, in my 30s, when I went back to get my master's, I was going for roles that I was already doing that people would go to school for their master's to get the jobs I was already doing, but I was looking for that next level. And I was hitting a ceiling like, oh, but you don't have your master's yet. I'm like, yeah, but I've done the work. Like I could. So I did it backwards where I jumped headfirst into it, learned how to do it. And then when I got my master's, I learned the theory behind why my actions happened to be successful. So it's a little bit reverse order there. But so what I tried to combine is the theory with the application so that it's actual real understanding. But anyways, why is learning development so important? We covered it a little bit, but especially in today's nonstop, very fast-paced world, why do you think learning development is so important?
well, for the very reason you say, because things are moving at breakneck speed. I mean, let's go back 150 years, right? Or maybe more. But 150 years or even 100 years, it's like you didn't you didn't need to know a lot of things because they didn't have any applications, but now it does. And so to keep up on things, you really need to continually learn. There was a time, certainly during the Industrial Revolution and just even probably up through the 90s, where being in a company and having experience mattered most, right?
Yeah, you
You're
could spend your whole career in one company.
right. Yeah, because and people who were getting let go were the people who were newbies, couldn't get rid
Mm.
of the experience. Now it's just the opposite. They're getting rid of the experience with the people who are higher on the pay scale and replacing them with younger people who have knowledge that the older people don't have. And before it wasn't like that because you went to college, you learned everything you need to know. You went to a company and then you learned the company's ways. But people coming out of college didn't have any, they didn't have any, they may have had more energy than you, but they didn't have more knowledge. Now
Yeah.
they come out and they've got more knowledge, right? Whatever it is, how do you use social media? How do you, how do you, how do you combine ChatGPT and spreadsheets to get, I mean, this stuff is fascinating and it solves lots of problems. And so if you're, if you're a little older, you need to kind of keep up on this and really make every day about, okay, I need to learn something new,
Mhm.
something relevant to what you're doing to continue to be able to bring value that's commensurate with what you're costing the company.
Yeah.
You want to raise every year, you need to increase your value every year.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you wish companies knew or did differently as it relates to learning and development? So you usually, I think your cohort is mostly like entrepreneurs and stuff. So from an
Yeah.
entrepreneur lens, like what should they be doing with their companies or them as the entrepreneur themselves as it relates to learning and development?
Um, Really trying to look ahead and saying, okay, where is this going? And I know that's a very imperfect science, but you can kind of see things a little bit. I mean, um, we've seen where things have gone in the last 30 years. I mean, as I indicated, when I started, I didn't even have a cell phone, right? That's just boggled. My kids had cell phones from the time they were 10 or whatever. I
Hmm.
don't know. It probably wasn't that
Hmm.
young, but still, you get my point.
I do.
And it's their world is so much different. Um, and they probably look at it and say, "Oh, Dad, you're so dumb. You don't know this, you don't know that." But what I try to push at them is you're going to have kids, God willing, you'll have kids, and they're going to do the same thing to you.
Such
You know, I,
such is the cycle of humanity.
yeah, I don't know what it's going to
Yeah.
be, but you're going to be the dumb dad who
Yeah.
hasn't kept up. Well, what
Yeah.
is that thing,
Yeah.
right? What is
Yeah.
that? COVID, before we hit record, we talked a lot about COVID.
Yeah.
We've known each other for years now.
Hmm.
Um, Talked about COVID, and COVID pushed us on Zoom.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
used Zoom to record podcasts. I started my podcast in 2018, talked to
Hmm.
people on my podcast, but I never used it to just have a conversation. Never.
Yeah. It's
Now I'll
wild.
have 15 people on a call. It's, every week. It's just, so what's next? What's that
Yeah.
next thing? I think that's what
Hmm.
companies need to look at. What's
Yeah.
next?
And it's so funny because even it's so rapidly progressing. When I look back at, even when I'm talking to someone even 10 years younger than me, it's a totally different experience. They used to do generations in terms of 20 years. I
Yeah.
think that's too much. Like
Yeah.
you look at the Xers, obviously they're always left out. But you look at millennials and at 20 years, there's a huge drastic difference of someone calling themselves a millennial for the elder
Yeah.
millennials or geriatric millennials, like they like to say about me, which I'm like, ugh. And then like the newbie millennials, and then even the Zers, right? And so I remember saying to people, and I remember feeling it very deeply when I started my career out of undergrad. I was commuting back and forth from Manhattan to Long Island for a couple of months. And I looked around the train and there were people, it was like an hour and a half and it was insane, like one way. And there were people who had been on that train with each other. They had like train families. They had been doing it for 10, 20 years. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
insane. And I remember thinking, if I could just do work on the train, like if I could just do some work because I was in corporate America, I was working 12-hour days and I was exhausted. And I was like, I just want to be productive.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I tell people that and they just don't remember that, like, oh wait, like now we get upset if like the Wi-Fi is slow or something on a train. But I used to be like, if I could just work on the train, I could
Yeah.
be productive during this hour and a half. And so not too long after that, I moved into the city, which I never thought would happen because I grew up on a horse farm. So I never thought I would live in the city, but I loved it. I loved my time there. But it's so funny because I so just the very, very visceral feeling of like, I just want to do
Yeah.
something. And now I have the opposite with I have small children, and with my small children, it's how do I create in today's world? Now I'm that old person being like, kids today don't have patience. And so I'm trying to create a mock thing of like how to let them handle disappointment because like they're never going to know the thrill of like the commercial's on and you run to get like a snack or something. It's
Yeah.
back, and you have to like run, and if you miss
Yeah.
it, you never see it again. And like, there's no like, oh, well, that's not on right now. No, like they know, even at young ages, they know. And so it's how do you create that tolerance for like, sometimes we have to be patient, sometimes we have to wait for things,
Yeah.
because it's that instant gratification world.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
hard.
amazing. Like, how do you teach people to take the time in this rapid paced, extremely fast world? So, anyways, fun one. Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I like to keep these short and sweet. So, would love to start to wrap up. One thing I always like to leave the audience with is one actionable tip or takeaway. I know you're the networking guru. What would you like to leave everyone with today that they can start doing in their lives today?
It's a simple, maybe not simple, but I'm consistent with this.
Yes, tell me.
Um, I tell people if you want to get yourself networked, and we all should be better networked, find something you care about, um, and volunteer because
Ooh,
you will come out of your little world to be with other people who care about the same thing and rub elbow to elbow with them. And it's healthy. Those relationships are healthy. It's great for networking because those people will learn about you, um, provide you opportunities, and certainly doing something that you love. So that's just something I encourage people to do.
I love that. And I'm going back in my memory here because I think the first time we connected, you had said was back in 2019. Actually, it's been a while, and a lot
August,
has
yeah,
changed in the world
yeah,
and for ours too. But I vaguely remember. So correct me if this isn't you, but I feel like you were the one who really talked about back then the power of I forget what the word is, but the not your direct connections, but your indirect connections, right? Didn't you used to
yep,
talk a lot about that? About like
yeah. It's
it's
called
actually the
the
strength of
strength,
your, what
strength
is
of
it?
weak tie. Well, it's called the
Weak
strength of weak
ties.
tie. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
remember that. And it's always lasted with me. I mean, even when I talk to like college kids or even like CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, people forget, like they only think about who they know and they don't think about like their cousin has a job at this company. They might know someone that would
yeah.
help. And so that really left a lasting impression on me. So thank you for that reminder of it's not just who you know, it's also all the weak ties of the people that they know that
Yeah.
you don't know, that you don't know.
I had this guy on my podcast. The book out there is called A Friend of a Friend, and
Oh,
he delves into that research and just how our how our networks work. I mean, it's not an academic sort of book. I mean, it's a good read. Um, but it just talks about the influence of our networks and just things like that. And just, I mean, it's fascinating stuff out there. I mean, it, if your husband's a smoker, you're 50% more likely to be a smoker, right?
hmm.
But if your husband's boss, who you've never met, is a smoker, even though your husband's not a smoker, you're 29% more likely to be a smoker. You
Wow.
know, if your husband's boss, who you've never met, is not a smoker, and your husband's not a smoker, but his wife is a smoker, you're 10% more likely to be a smoker. It's just, I mean, it's
Wow.
just,
Exposure stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's just how
Or
we
like
are. how,
Indirect exposure.
yeah,
Yeah.
how we're connected. And that's just, and that works in reverse too. I mean, if your husband's up working out all the time,
Yeah.
then, then you're more likely to be healthier. So
Yeah,
anyhow,
yeah.
good book,
And
friend of a
that's what I
friend.
always think about this is like we have the opportunity to raise the collective. Like we can help each
Yeah.
other be better, and that kind of goes hand in hand with that research. So, well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate it. Thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.
And with that, we'll begin to wrap up. So I hope this discussion gave our audience a few new perspectives, sparked some ideas, and left you with at least one takeaway you can put into action immediately. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and join us every Tuesday as we continue exploring learning, leadership, and what it takes to help people and organizations grow. And if today's conversation resonated with you, or if you'd like to join me for a future episode, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and let's talk again on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.